Israel so far who are in bomb shelters with their children as I come to you. It's 11 o'clock in Israel PM right now, and dear friends of mine are in bomb shelters with their children. That's the situation right now. So here's where we are. As I mentioned a minute ago, at least 1,200 rockets launched at Israel so far. I mentioned it's a new escalation. Here's why. Because in the past, Hamas obviously has targeted the Israeli communities around the Gaza Strip. We're thinking of Sderot and the kibbutzim, around beautiful communities that are based around Gaza. Sderot's only about 2 miles from Gaza, for instance. We also have seen Ashkelon and Ashdod, which are a bit north of the Gaza Strip, on the Mediterranean coast, Israel's Mediterranean coast. We have seen them hit very hard in previous engagements between Israel and Hamas. But folks, nothing like this round. Ashkelon has really borne the brunt of this Hamas rocket barrage. Beautiful city, by the way, right on the Mediterranean coast. What a view of the Mediterranean Sea. Beautiful beaches in Ashkelon. It's tragic to see this, to say the least. That's the only word I can think of off the top of my head. So number one, Ashkelon, for instance, in a 1 hour span yesterday, Tuesday, May 11th, Ashkelon was hit by 200 rockets. Folks, in 60 minutes, 200 rockets rained down on Ashkelon. That's one piece to it, why this is a new escalation. The second reason why this is uncharted territory for Israel and Hamas is that Jerusalem was targeted fairly extensively on Monday with some 7 rockets aimed at God's holy city, the ancient and ancestral capital of the state of Israel. I'll get back. I know it's not the first time that rockets have been launched at Jerusalem. I'll revisit that in a second. Let me make my last point, why this is a new escalation and new ground, Tel Aviv. While southern Israel, sadly, we've seen bombarded for a decade and a half now, central Israel, in particular Tel Aviv, where some 70% of the Israeli population lives in and around that Tel Aviv metropolitan area, Tel Aviv has been hit by hundreds of rockets. Okay, how is all this different? Well, I mentioned Jerusalem. In 2014, and this is what we're seeing right now, is the biggest conflict between Israel and Hamas in 7 years. Ladies and gentlemen, the summer of 2014 was the last time that we saw such a major flare-up. And this is becoming much more than a flare-up. It may escalate into a broader war, God forbid. But in that 2014 engagement, in the summer of 2014, we saw sirens go off in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. We saw a missile launched towards Ben Gurion Airport, even a missile launched as far as Haifa, which is north of Tel Aviv on the Mediterranean coast. Haifa is the third largest city in Israel, behind Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Those were sporadic in 2014. There were kind of brief instances of rocket fire at those far-flung targets. This time around, it is steady. It is sustained rocket fire at the Tel Aviv metropolitan area and points around it in central Israel. What I'm saying to you folks is this. The theater of war, I guess you would call it, has changed. It's grown bigger. Hamas is no longer satisfied with, which is horrific enough, bombarding the communities surrounding the Gaza Strip a mile, 2 miles away, say 20, 30 miles in the case of Ashkelon or Ashdod, a little further. No. Hamas right now is showing, hey, since the last engagement in summer 2014, we have really expanded our reach and upped our game, so to speak. They have rockets that have greater distance now. These are larger rockets, reportedly, according to people on the ground in Israel,